What is up, grinders? Welcome to a UFC 297 Before Lock. I am your host, Mike Brown, aka H3 Buddha, here with my pal, Squirrel Patrol. Squirrel, fun card, 2 5-round fights, not the best quality. What does that mean, though? It means high scores, man. I think we're going to see some big scores out there this week.
Yeah, no, it should be a good one. I mean, we've got some pretty loaded cards coming up in terms of the pay-per-views. Yeah. So this one, just relative to the other pay-per-views, isn't tremendous, but a little bit of action going on with the Strickland and Plessis, a little bit of a build-up there. Maybe some staging. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Definitely staging. Definitely. Yeah. I mean, listen, the name value isn't here, but for fantasy relevance, top to bottom. I mean, the first fight of the night, for instance, you're gonna know where you are right away.
Yeah. So is it the Malcolm Gordon?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's a really interesting one because I think Malcolm Gordon's a Canadian, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. And so the line was opened pretty close, and then it's been moving in the favor of Malcolm Gordon. Then that creates a lot of win equity for Gordon. So he's going to be pretty highly owned, I think. I don't know that I really am in love with that play because if the line's moving in his favor because he's Canadian, that's almost implying that it's going to go to the judges' scorecards, and then it's not going to be that high scoring. So even at 8,300, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Malcolm Gordon. That's not a super high quality fight.
Listen, a strong wind could knock that guy out.
Yeah. So, and I think you guys covered it pretty well on the Ground and Pound podcast, talking about how it's two guys that get knocked out, but also that don't necessarily have a lot of power. So, mm-hmm. So it's the movable force meets the meets the very light wind or whatever, right? It'll be interesting to see what happens. There's a big range of outcomes because Malcolm Gordon actually has one of the highest first round knockout chances on the card. And I think he's top 3. I think there's 3 fighters that have over 30%. But he's not really known for that. So
it's funny. We've never really been dealt a minus 150 inside the distance at 8,300. I love how we're just going right into the first fight because honestly, you're going to know where your lineups are right away. That's the problem. And usually we talk about the first, 2 5-round fights. I don't even think we can start there because it's your night's over. But it smells like you think it could go to a decision, and this is going to garner a ton of ownership.
Yeah, I think if it goes to decision, I don't know that it's going to end up on the winning lineup. But either one of these guys can get knocked out, but they don't have a bunch of power. So I don't know. My gut is to be a little bit underweight. I think it's just going to be highly owned.
It's terrifying.
But it's not some kind of rescheduling thing where Malcolm Gordon got some opponent off the street. Some guy's coming in off his couch and was doing his DraftKings lineups, and now he's fighting Malcolm Gordon. It's just a little bit of line movement. And it's so at 8,300, I don't know. I want to try to find the top 6 scoring fighters on the slate, and I just don't know if one of these guys is going to be in there.
Let's talk about the context of the slate. 2 5-round fights. You know what people do. You know how they're going to build. Typically, with these 2 5s, they start right here, and then they ignore, the potential to fade one of them. How are you going to make your lineups? Because obviously, the main event with the 2 men, that's going to garner a lot of the ownership there. And then I really think that a range of outcomes for that women's fight is one of the widest ranges I've ever seen. And I feel, and talk me out of it if I'm crazy, you'd have to back up the math portion of it, I guess, and the percentages of ownership, because I feel like they should be higher owned a little bit because of that 5 rounds. But I think it's also caked in that they could go 4 or 5 rounds and only get 65 points in that women's particular fight. So, I would rather real low ownership and take a stance on it. I think it's owned pretty accurate.
Yeah, I think both 5-round fights are going to be higher owned than if they were not 5-round fights, which is reasonable. I get the Plessis and Strickland fight. That could be a lot of action. I mean, it could stall out, but I think it's more likely to see some action. And either of these guys could finish, could get a finish inside the distance, but they probably don't need it. They're high paced enough did over 5 rounds. If it goes 5 rounds, that it could be, a fight you have to have. I think we're showing it maybe like 80% ownership. I think, we've got the the kind of simulation optimal results, and that's showing that it should be owned, I think, 70 to 75% of the time. So it's showing up as a little bit overowned, but I don't know. I feel like I'm more likely to be in the 80% at the 80% like total ownership mark than the 70%. I don't think it's a fight you necessarily have to have. You have to lock in one of these two fighters. I think more often than not, one of these, Strickland or Duplessis is going to end up in the winning lineup.
Now, it's a rare instance where I think Strickland's going to be lower owned, and his style usually is take you out a little bit deeper in the fights, take over down the stretch, whereas Duplessis is a bull. I mean, this guy will come forward too. I mean, I think you're going to see them both come forward, but I have a feeling that there could be some sneaky stall ability in this fight. If it does get stretched out, I think it leans towards Strickland because Duplessis' equity is going to be based upon that finish. I really think that he's going to have to get a finish to score well. I just think he'll be a little bit more counter-striking over 5 rounds. And then, leaning into the other one, the women's title fight there for 5 rounds, Bueno Silva's inside the distance is another one of those situations where it's like you get a somewhat middle range. 86 is just enough above it, but plus 140 inside the distance, 40% owned potentially. And then Pennington's got a lot of experience. I feel like this is a situation where I almost wish I could step on the pedal and put Pennington with confidence into my lineups. She just doesn't score well. She really doesn't. It's volume based.
Yeah, I've got a take there. So if we look at the simulation results, we show like Strickland being owned a little bit less than he should, Duplessis being owned a little bit more, and Mayra Bueno Silva being owned like way more than she should, and Pennington being pretty underowned. And actually, I think I'm going to agree with that because I actually think Pennington has got the reputation where she's just not that high scoring, but now she has 5 rounds to work with, and she's probably not she's almost certainly not going to get the finish. So if she wins the fight, I mean, she's got I think a 40% chance to win the fight. So she's the underdog, but she's priced like that. And at 7,600, like if she's getting 5 rounds, even though she's not the highest paced, I don't know, a win probably puts her there. Like I'm going to go for the deal on Pennington.
Do you think underdogs win on this card? Because that makes your decision making a little bit easier. I think I have a feeling the chalk could run out, and if that happens, it would play into your point.
Yeah, I've actually put less thought into that than I normally have because I didn't do my underdogs article. So I'm trying to think of like what underdogs do I really like.
Well, I mean, let's just talk through it, right? Let's on the spot. Let's just talk through. I mean, Tavares very clearly going to absorb the ownership of these guys with a plus 175 inside the distance line. Looks like he's a kill or be killed fighter. It's a rematch there. Then you have Woodson is a guy I don't want to have any confidence behind. He's got length. He could have volume, decent over. But, I mean, you got Viana. When a Viana fights, there's a low percentage outcome almost always on the table. Low percentage submission, a meme-like knockout. She's done it before. She's always going to have, like, finish equity, sneaky. Armfield is somebody I don't think people are going to want to go to. And Allen, I mean, should be on the mat all the time. But sneaky, though, win equity is going to be there if he makes it to the bell. I'll put it that way because he might be able to put up a fight on the feet. So, sorry, I'm crossing off Magny and Priscilla Cachoeira. I mean, don't hate me.
Yeah, I'm kind of scarred after last week with the Nicholas Mota beating Tom Nolan. Just like, man, you really can't like scratch anybody off. I agree. Like Diana, at that low price tag, like she scores pretty well and wins, and she's just like it looks like she's a huge underdog. She's not that huge. She's got about 28% chance to win the fight. I bet she's like lands on the lineup, winning lineup maybe 25% of the time, and she's going to see probably half that ownership. So she's probably somebody I want to be over the field on.
She's got upside too. It's not like you're just getting like perhaps like win equity. Her ceiling is actually pretty damn large.
Yeah, like just looking at the game log, like she's put up some some triple-digit scores on DraftKings before.
Mm-hmm.
So if she gets that win, like she's a fighter that I'd want to be over the field on. Kind of the same thing with Pennington, where 7,600, 5 rounds to work with. She's got that reputation for being low scoring. I don't even know if everyone's going to realize this is a 5-round fight. Like everyone's going to know like the Strickland Plessis fight is 5 rounds. People might not really even realize the Pennington fight is going to be 5 rounds. Sam Patterson, actually kind of agree with Liam's take. If he had to take he thinks Patterson's live to win this fight. Like the expectations are low. His last fight, I think, was in the UK.
He's also moving up. Remember, he came in with a little bit of hype as a grappler, comes out swinging in that first fight, gets knocked out at a lower weight division. Now he's moving up in weight against Loyanesi, who literally, Squirrel, has the lowest score in 3-round history, I think, which is one of the most impressive feats. Outside of the Ngannou and Lewis fight, this one was the one where it's like, Loyanesi, do something. Like, he actually is the same thing as Derek Lewis. Let's be honest. That's the mold. If he gets that equity, it's that first-round equity. Other than that, it's boom, it falls off a cliff.
Yeah, but he's got one of the higher first-round finish odds, right, on the slate. So that's
is that biased? It's probably biased too. That's the crazy part about it, right? Like we just saw Patterson get knocked out. That's going to take that line up, and make it look like gold. And I somewhat hope that people are going to be drawn into that fight because the deeper it goes, it might just get really ugly. Like they lean on each other, against the cage type of fight.
Yeah, but that leaves me again more to Patterson than F7,800 because he can do less and still end up on the winning line, right? Like he doesn't necessarily need the higher score. I mean, Lenessi's 8,400, so that's a little bit more expensive. So you have to put up a little bit of a higher score to end up on the winning lineup. I probably, in terms of the underdogs, like Patterson, Pennington, and Viana, maybe MMB.
I'll tell you, if I'm MMEing, I'm trying to not necessarily do this on purpose, but I would try to avoid that Sergey and Ramon fight. And I think that's going to absorb a lot more ownership than what it shows on Lineup HQ. Make sure you guys are, signing up, getting onto Lineup HQ, build your lineups. We got a couple hours now before lock, but I do think that that's one that obviously everyone wants to play this. It's a rematch. We've seen Sergey take out Tavares, quote unquote, in the first round. I don't know if you saw that one, Squirrel, but that was a Contender Series where it was one of those flash type of knockdowns. The referee jumps in, the guy gets up immediately and is ready to fight. And it was a really bad stoppage. But at the same time, Sydney did knock him down before. So I wish there was more higher owned in that spot so I could go a little bit underweight. But some of these lines on these fights, like we just talked about the Patterson, right? There's just bias all over it. Like 175 inside the distance for Tavares, and then Sydney's like plus 120. Vegas doesn't want to get burned by these things anymore, do they?
Yeah, and was Tavares missed weight by a lot. So I don't know. Like I think I'm siding more with City. Yeah. On that one, just. Like Tavares missing weight by so much, and I think I didn't see the video, but apparently he didn't look that great on the scale. So yeah, I'm probably gonna be siding with Sidey there. No pun intended, but not a fight I'm necessarily looking to be overweight on.
Yeah, no, I agree. I wish it was a little bit higher owned, and I'm gonna put 2 names out there that are in the same exact boat for me: Brad Katona, Movsar Evloev. And I'm going to tell you why. I think Katona could potentially be that guy because everybody loves himself some Evloev. He's only coming in at 25-ish%. We have Katona at 20% at the moment. Katona actually put a pace out there that was really nice for us last time out there, Squirrel. And I think they're sneaky grappling. Hashtag, it's more so fading Garrett Armfield. But my other problem is a lot of Katona's fights, the optics of his fights tend to be pretty close. Like even in the fight that I told you last time, he scored a bunch of significant strikes. It was somewhat close. Even I was live in person. It's like he's getting hit. So I do think that Armfield Sneaky has some win equity, but I also feel like in that fight, the ceiling is for Katona. And then Movsar Evloev, man, this guy's a monster. We know what he does. He goes in for takedowns, but what does the score look like if he only gets 3 takedowns against Arnold Allen and goes to a decision? I don't think there's going to be a lot to be had there.
I agree, but would rather take the chance on Evelev than Mike Malott. I think because Malott's not that high pace. So I agree. I like this. I like playing like that range, that price range more, and like taking some of the ownership that I think will be going to like Malott and like sprinkling it down a little bit cheaper. Because like just comparing them, like Malott has like the high chance for a first round finish for inside the distance, like knockout, but he's not really that high paced. They gets like submissions as well, but he's not really that high paced like ground and pound type fighter, and he needs to be at 9,300. Like if prices were switched, I would I would go in for Malott over like Evelev or Katona. But I agree. Like, we don't necessarily know like how these fights are going to score, and I think Malott is going to absorb all the ownership. Maybe even like Jillian Robertson, to some extent, is going to like absorb all that ownership. And I like dropping down a little bit more in that price range.
Yeah, and Malott actually got bailed out last time. Let's be honest. The last fight's going to show you 105 fantasy points, but he had Adam Fugit in front of him. Second round finish, knocked him down and took him down twice. Like I don't really look into it. Sometimes the scoring can look way better than what it is, and it's tricky. I mean, he hasn't topped 30 significant strikes in 3 fights. It's concerning.
Yeah, and I feel like was his last fight in Canada too. I know he
might have been last June. I don't know if they had gone to Canada yet, but regardless, there was a lot of people behind him. He's got the full send crew behind him. He's got the Canada crowd.
Yeah.
We've got producer TJ here. Malott or Jasdavicius straight up. I mean, straight up. Moneyline's going to say double J, baby. Jasmine. And she's got built-in takedowns. So talk me through that, because like you said, Malott is going to be caked up into that first round equity, I think, in this spot. So you and I probably agree there.
Yeah, I probably would rather go with Jasmine if you have the money. She's got it's pretty closely aligned. Like if you break it down to percentages, they're both at about 75% to win their fight. I just think Malott is more, you're really hoping for like a first round submission, first round knockout, whereas Jasmine can score a little bit better over 3 rounds. But because of that, I think Jasmine's going to be lower owned. Also, like the price tag, she's going to be lower owned.
Yeah.
So
this isn't our type of card, right? This is one where people don't want to play the women. They're going to gravitate towards the inside the distance lines. That's why what the comment you said about the Katona, the Evelebs of the world, the Sedes type of the world, those are the guys that can set you apart. Whereas when I was building through optimizers and whatnot, it was actually sprinkling a lot of underdogs. Like it was sprinkling Vianas in, it was sprinkling in Tavares, where when I'm building up my lineups, I would rather sprinkle on the upper echelon of guys that give me that extra ceiling on a card like this, because I think the ceilings on those guys are more important than some of that win equity. Because I do think chalk wins here. There might be a possibility where 2 or 3 underdogs are winners, but when that happens, I'd rather be sprinkling on the upper echelon guys and take a stance down below.
Yeah, I think I'm going to avoid, for the most part, like the really big underdogs. I do think I'm going to go like to the upper middle range. I think everyone's going to be clicking on Malcolm Gordon and then Malott. And I think like Gordon's going to be too highly owned. I think I'm going to go, but I like Malott is the scary fade for me, I think. Just because I think people are going to overestimate his chances of like getting an early win, and then or thinking like, oh, he's going to put up like a huge score in a win. Like if he could get a really impressive 3rd round knockout that just scores terribly for DraftKings. So I think I'm going to be going like to the upper mid range, right? Like like the Katona, Evelev, and just hope for the best. Maybe Jourdain, and hope for the best.
Yeah, let me do the ad read quick, and then I'm going to talk about a fight that we haven't even talked about, and it makes me pretty interested. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook. Bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets for new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Those of you in the great state of Vermont now have access to FanDuel Sportsbook as well, with a special bonus offer. Bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets on any market. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. And the low-owned fight I'm talking about that we haven't even talked about. That's the reason why we haven't talked about it, is because I don't think people want to go here. Is Chris Curtis versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Talk about volume. I think that Barriault's going to try to come out there and take his damn head off. He's in his hometown up there in Canada. Chris Curtis is a guy that actually doesn't score all that well for DraftKings purposes and FanDuel scoring. My concern is that people are going to overlook him because we just talked about that range that's above and below. So he's another one of these guys that people don't want to go to Chris Curtis, but he's going to have a guy right in front of him that probably is going to be there for scoring. So how are you handling this one? Because I almost want to play Curtis at low ownership because I feel like he could, a deep first round finish would look amazing for scoring on this fight.
Yeah, actually, I agree. I want to be able to fill on this one. Like, these are big dudes who can put another guy down. It's not necessarily like, the highest inside the distance, the highest first round finish chances, but like, either one of them is absolutely capable of doing it. Chris Curtis doesn't tend to be that high volume, but Barriault can be pretty high volume. So like, I'd rather play the ownership game and be over the field on these guys because they are physically capable of doing it. So even if it's like not the highest chances, like that's kind of priced in to the ownership, and then they're not that expensive either. So yeah, like Curtis kind of fits into that range, that I was talking about. The Katona Evelev, they want to be over the field on that.
It's a dead range. It really is. And that's why, would you agree? Like, I like sprinkle shotting these types of fighters, like taking a couple pieces of these guys instead of going for those, jamming in Jasmine, jamming in Malott. I just think those types of builds, even going like Jasmine to Robertson might be unique. Would you agree there? Like, those are the types of takes that you need to get to first place instead of just, min cashing.
Yeah, I think Jasmine will be a little bit under-owned because she's too expensive, and there's so many, like, the 5-round fight being in the like absolute middle range. So like, people are going to take one of those fighters. People are going to take Malcolm Gordon. They're going to see the win equity, and then you have like 2 fighters there in the mid range. And then even if you're playing like Buena Silva, then like you've got like 3 fighters between like 8,600 and 8,000. And so then you're like, well, like Malott is like, kind of the Canadian star or whatever. I'm going to take him. And you're going to see like a lot of really common constructions, but then that whole range, I think between like Strickland, well, I guess between Gordon at 8,300 and like up to Malott. So like the 9,300 to 8,300 range is going to be pretty under-owned. And so that's where I want to be over the field. Because like
we haven't had a card like this. Let's be honest. It's kind of the range of outcomes on this card as a whole is pretty crazy too, because you've got to get that, 2 5-round fights correct or I guess, avoid if it busts. And then Kirk brought up a good point. Malott leg kicking would really be bad. I mean, that would be bad. Any distance fighting is really not good.
Yeah, I agree. Malott is probably the one where I'm like really scared to fade him, but I think you've got to do it because even like the smaller field contest, you're just going to have the money to get there. So people are going to go there because he's got, decent inside the distance. He's talked about one of the, best, just best lines on the card, best win odds on the card. And he's Canadian. I think people are going to go there. I think his chances of having a low scoring win are higher than people are realizing.
Oh, well, Kirk says that Magny can't take a leg kick. Well, that would mean more scoring. But we don't get leg kick knockdowns, Kirk. You know this. We do not get them. It happens very, very rare. Yeah. The UFC stats do not like it. But, I did cross off, quote unquote, 2 people. But I guess if I had to force to Magny and Cachoeira, at least Cachoeira goes out there to try to take your damn head off. Like, the problem is she's not going to kill off a ton of ownership on Jasmine. Like, I almost wish Jasmine had that Malott type of ownership, right? Like, she just can't defend a takedown, which is troublesome for fantasy.
Yeah, I'll probably end up over the field just because I think you should be over the field on these like really cheap underdogs. Because we see it probably every month, right? We see a Nicholas Moda go out there. So first round win, 6,800.
Yeah, she will try to cheat. She will definitely gouge your eyes, push against the cage with her feet in there.
Yeah. So like the problem is I always end up about 50% over the field on these fighters that have about a 25% chance to win. They're like 6% owned. I'll have 10%, 12%, and then my lineup still won't get there, right? Like I still won't have the right combination. But yeah, I don't know. I want to be over the field on the really cheap low owned fighters, but they that's because they're going to be like 5% owned.
Well, Jourdain and Woodson is another one, right? Like where Jourdain fights to me always fall into that second tier of like he doesn't go for the kill most of the time. The last time he was forced into that situation with a submission, right? Like he's going to have 93 points for the last 2 fights, but Ramos went for the takedown, boom, he was out of there like quick. So I really somewhat don't look at that fight as a typical outcome for him. His typical scoring is just, maybe 65 to 70 points. It's really not that good, but could Woodson be the guy that is lower owned in this range that nobody goes to? I mean, I'm clawing here, but he's got distance. He's got potential for volume striking, a potential war, but I mean, it should go 3 rounds, and it probably means that it falls off a cliff for fantasy wise.
I like Jourdain probably a little bit more than the field, and I might end up under the field on Woodson. Like I prefer Viana to Woodson, and Jourdain was his fight like 2 fights ago. He was playing like Kron Gracie, and Gracie just like laid on his back the entire time. So he put up I think a pretty decent score, but there wasn't much he could do. So I think he might have the potential to be a little bit higher scoring than he's shown, and he's got some decent scores. Like he's got some scores in the 90s in his game log. He's 9,000, so he's not super expensive. I think people won't click on him as much as they should. He's got a couple losses in the 50 somethings. Like if you add the 30 to that for the win, right? If that was a decision win instead of a decision loss, then that's kind of a decent score. Like I think he can get there more often than people are going to click on him.
Yeah, and it's just there's some fights like that we talked about there with that one. I mean, I don't know what else. The Curtis fight, those are 2 fights that are just going to be relying on volume and, I mean, the early finish equity, if there is some in those spots. And again, just to circle back on it, I think Barriot is a guy that's going to go overlooked too. That's why I'm thinking like Woodson and Barriot. If one of those guys wins, I'm going to be broke. I'm not going to like it, but it's not somewhere I'm going to land.
Yeah, I think it's a wide open card, but I think ownership is going to concentrate on certain fighters like Malott and other fighters, Malcolm Gordon. And I think things are wide open. So I agree. We've seen a few cards now where somebody's got like a 50% chance of a first round finish, or 2/3 chance, like Jean Silva last week. I think it was like minus 200 to win in the first round. And he did. So we've had some fights like that where it's like, this fighter is like 9,500, but their odds are so good. It's like really scary fade. This one, there's nobody that I'm really afraid to fade. And it's wide open. So I'm just going to kind of play the presumed ownership. And like the projections that I'm seeing, are just not necessarily representative of what I think the fighters can put up. So yeah, I'm going to try to play that to my advantage.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good take there. And it'll come down to that main event. Hopefully you have lineups that are live by the main event. Cause like I said, that first fight's going to be a real deciding factor if it hits a ceiling win, and you can always rebuild and do some showdown or something like that. I think that you and I always talk about that. And ceiling wise, who do you think would be the highest scorer? Let's not say Malott. You and I think Malott has that extreme ceiling, but I feel like it's concerning the deeper the fight goes. Who do you think that we might not think of that could have a high ceiling? Because I'll tell you mine right away. I think it's Katona. I think Katona is a hidden gem on this card at 8,800, and he's just got the game logs. People aren't going to want to go there, and I'd rather fade Armfield long term.
Yeah, I'm probably going to go with Evloev. Like I think he's going to be too low owned. Like if he's just racking up those takedowns, then like that's a lot of points. And so if Arnold Allen is able to get up, which I think he probably will be able to, Evloev could just put up a massive like triple digit score. So that's something I definitely want to be over the field on.
He better get up. because he get that the rinse repeat is there for him, and I love the rinse repeat. It's control time. I don't know about the like vicious ground and pound, like elbows. Like sometimes he's okay to just hold him down, but that might be a good thing, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Like I actually don't like taking this kind of like rinse and repeat takedown artist against like really, really inferior opponents, because the concern is they get their first takedown and that's it. But like if Arnold Allen can get up and like Allen's like a decent fighter, then suddenly like you might see one of those like 10 takedown fights where it goes 3 rounds, but he puts up a massive score over 3 rounds. I mean, he could also lose the fight, right? Because it's a little bit more of, of a decent opponent. But yeah, if Arnold Allen can just keep getting up, then Evloev can put up a pretty big score.
Final thoughts on this one. Viana, do you really think, I mean, I'm going to be chasing her because of her inside the distance. I like targeting fighters that have decent inside the distance lines. And I like the ownership when you factor that in too. Like it's showing 12% at the moment. It seems low for a girl who can absolutely hit a ceiling.
Sorry, who is that?
Viana, Pauliana.
Yeah, no, I do like Viana. Like she's really cheap, and like people look at these like really cheap underdogs and they go, oh well, they have no shot to win. Like she's got almost a 30% chance of winning the fight. Like that's like that's gonna happen, and especially when they put up a decent score in the win. Yeah, that's like somebody I want to be able to build on.
Absolutely, guys. Hey, we have a week off. It's kind of crazy. Come back to the new year. 2 fight cards on. Now we're back on a little hiatus for a week, but we will be back. There's going to be, I believe, 13 fights the next fight card in 2 weeks. But for Squirrel, for TJ, myself, we will see you guys in 2 weeks. Have a good UFC and NFL Saturday.